everybody. I'm Tom Vassell. This is the Dice Tower, and welcome to Look Back. This is the first episode in a mostly weekly series that I'm going to be putting out, where I'm going to take a look back at reviews that I did a year ago and reviews that I did 5 years ago. Now, the number of reviews is going to change, but each week I'll look back at the exact same dates a year ago or 5 years ago, so in this instance from the middle of September, and tell you what I think about these games now. Have they stuck in my collection? Have my opinions on them gone up or down? Or maybe I haven't touched them since. All right? And I think this is a useful thing because this lets us take a look at these games and say, oh, this game has stood the test of time, or this one hasn't. So first we'll start with the games I reviewed last year. We'll start with Crossmaster Quest. Now this one was just re-released by Kumin or Not. So I'm anxious to try out the new version, but I always liked Crossmaster. I liked the little pre-painted chibi figures, and Crossmaster was pretty cool. Crossmaster Quest was kind of a mess. Now, I liked it. I ranked it at 6.5, and I'm going to stick with that for now because I liked the idea of going around and questing and such, but I would have preferred it to be more streamlined. Had it been more streamlined, it could have been an 8 or 9 maybe. That's how I love the universe. I like that you could bring people in. But hopefully Kumin or Not has worked it around. Like I said, I haven't looked at the new version of it yet, so maybe that's coming to check, but I certainly want to try this one again. Witkasi. This was a kind of a game where you're building paintings down based on a famous painter. It was an interesting idea. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 6. I would still probably give it that same rating now, but it's not one I really want to go back to. It's unique, and I look at it and go, oh yeah, it's kind of a cool game, but okay, what else is there? On the other hand, Star Wars Boom Boom Balloon, which I did rank a 6, I think I would keep that, but that's one I could play again. This I got, and I was at this time I was getting all these new Star Wars games because they were coming out, so I tried everything. And this was based on Boom Boom Balloon, where you're trying to pop a balloon. So this game isn't necessarily my style. My kids really like the idea, that whole, will this pop the balloon? Flick 'em Up, Stallion Canyon. Hey, last week I just reviewed the newest expansion, Red Rock Tomahawk. Stallion Canyon was great. I loved Flick 'em Up. It is a fantastic game. Stallion Canyon, I rated an 8. I still really love this with the horses. A really cool expansion. If you get Flick 'em Up, you gotta get Stallion Canyon. Still think so. I Know was like a little trivia style game. 6, I gave it. It was a decent game. Forgettable. I do remember the playing of it. And saying, oh, these are interesting questions, and there's that whole interesting question type aspect of how many clues do you need, but there's a lot of these party games out there. This one's going to be gone in the times, I'm sure. On the other hand, Seven Wonders Duel. Wow, I gave this game a 9, and it's still there. Watch my top 100 list this year because it's in there. This 2-player game, which I like Seven Wonders, but I love Seven Wonders Duel, and I'm really excited. There's an expansion coming out for it at Essen. This is one of the 2 games on the list so far, the other one being Flick 'em Up Stallion Canyon, that is still in my collection. Terra, this was based, Bezier Games kind of redid Fauna. Originally, Fauna, designed by Friedemann Friese, was a trivia game about animals all over the world, which sounds not that interesting, but it was a really good game because it's about not just knowing, but knowing who else might know, or almost knowing. And almost like a Wits and Wagers style type game. Well, Terra took that and upped the ante to not just animals. So in case you don't know a lot about animals, this had all sorts of things from all over the world, and they actually made a new version of it, the best one I think, which is America this year. But Terra was still a fine game. I gave it an 8. I'll stick with that. Ships from Martin Wallace. This was a game that I expected to be overly complex, and it was not. It's actually a pretty straightforward game, and it has a lot of interaction between the players as you're going through time building ships. Very historical, like many of his games are. Rank it a 7. I think it was a fine game. You probably could talk me into playing it again, although with so many games coming out these days, Portal, the board game, I went into this one expecting it to be bad, and it was actually good. I gave it a 7. I still think so. I still have not to this day played Portal, the computer game. Yes, I know how horrible, but anyhow, this game with really beautiful pieces, little plastic cakes, and just a solid, almost like a puzzle game. You're trying to, be the one to get your piece of cake, and so you're moving around on this board and setting up traps for other players. Check it out, actually. So now we're to the third game that's still in my collection from a year ago, and that would be No Thanks. Of course, No Thanks was much older than that. I just happened to re-review it last year. I think I took a look at the new Mayfair version. No Thanks, amazing game. Solid little card game. Either take a card or put a chip on it. This game I've used many times. I think it's essential for pretty much everyone's collection. Great game, 8.5, still that way. And then stipulations. This was kind of a game, think of the evil genie who's like, you can have anything you want. You're like, oh, I want $1 million. You do, but you can never touch money. Things, it's like, you have this great thing happen to you, but here is the weird stipulation. That's an interesting idea, but this game didn't work back then. I gave it a 5, and yeah, I haven't even thought about it since, until today. Now let's take a look at games from 5 years ago. Now, none of these games from 5 years ago on today's list I still have, but some of them I think are quite good. We'll start with a very good one, Lancaster. Lancaster is a worker placement game in which you put knights out to do different actions and control things, but you could displace someone's knight with a better knight, and you could upgrade your knights and things. I gave this a 7 when I reviewed it. I would actually, this is one of the few games that has gone higher in my estimation. I would give it an 8 today. It is a really solid game. It's beautiful looking, has a little bit of history to it, but it also just has that back and forth as you're trying to get laws into play and control different regions. Really good and kind of vicious worker placement game. I don't always want to play that kind of style, but this one worked really well for me. Wild Horses. This was a kids game. They've actually remade it called Fastlane. It's for kids from Playroom Entertainment, where you roll 2 dice and find the one on the board. The fastest person is going to be if someone's really fast, they're going to win at this game, unfortunately. However, I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. It just means that there's a lot of other kids games. I gave this a 6. It's fine. I'd play it with kids, but not in my collection any longer for my kids. Ikusa. This was the updated version 5 years ago of Samurai Swords or Shogun, that big Milton Bradley Game Masters game, Samurais, which was one of the best of that series. And I really liked Ikusa. I gave it a 7. It was a great update, but even a 7 was kind of a drop from the 9 I had probably given it in college because I loved the game back then. And even though I think it's a cool game and a lot going on, and the production of Ikusa was stellar, except for it was missing the plastic swords, but other than that, stellar, it's just not a game that's really my style these days. If someone said, we're going to play Ikusa, I go, oh, that's cool. I'll come watch for a while. But that would probably be the extent of it. But it is a really solid, cool, upgrade to Risk, essentially. Jab, real-time boxing. It's hard to believe this one's 5 years old already from Tasty Minstrel Games. This was a speed game. I thought I would not like it, and then I ended up, it was pretty fun. You're just playing punches, and it actually kind of gave you the idea of boxing back and forth as you're playing these cards against another player, trying to beat them. It seems to have been forgettable. I don't see anyone talking about it. Real-time games have a hard time making it as it is. I gave it a 6.5. I'm probably going to stick with that now. Yeah, you could talk me into playing it, but I just haven't seen it in a long time. Love it, hate it. This is one of those games that I found at a discount bin somewhere, probably Barnes & Noble's, and it's a game in which it's kind of like takes the say anything aspect where, if you were going to save one thing from a house, what would be the one thing you would love to save? What would be the one thing you would hate to have saved? And you can even go watch my review and see an example of it. I played it with my kids, but it's forgettable. I gave it a 6. Yeah, it's probably there, but I wouldn't go out of my way to hunt it down with so many better party games. Then we have Cambria. Now, Cambria I gave a 6 to, I believe, originally, but I'd probably drop it to a 5 now, and I'll tell you why. Because I couldn't remember anything about the game. I had to watch the review I made 5 years ago, and after watching I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound very interesting, and I still couldn't remember it. It's just that forgettable area control, a little boring. It looks boring. So, yeah, I can't really recommend a game that I can't remember. Space Maze, the one thing that stood out to me in my review of Space Maze, I was like, these components are great. They're good, but that just shows how much better components have gotten in the last 5 years. This, kind of moving around in a maze area, trying to get a hat. Anytime you try to get a hat, that's a good thing. So I gave this one a 6.5. It's fine, but it's obviously been forgotten because I haven't heard anyone talk about it since then. And Kingdoms of Crusaders. This was a game from Right Games. Now, Right Games was a Russian company. This was when they were first coming out. Their games were not that fantastic. They have since gotten much better as time has gone by. And one of their games that came out at the same time as Kingdoms of Crusaders, Evolution, was taken by North Star and really run well. Kingdoms of Crusader, I gave it a 5.5. Yeah, that's what it is, 5.5, because the idea of playing different cards with the different color bars on them was cool. It just didn't work as well as it was supposed to, and the theme, Kingdom of Crusaders, meant absolutely nothing. So, anyway, those are my thoughts on games I reviewed last year and 5 years ago. Like I said, I'll try to do this weekly, and sometimes there won't be one because maybe a year or 5 years ago I didn't review any games that week. But as time goes by, hopefully this will give you the long view where you can take a look and say, oh, this is how he feels about the game now. Anyway, I'm Tom Vassell. This is the Dice Tower, and you've been watching a look back.